You can be more successful with this year's Region and All-State auditions while spending less time in the practice room. Last year, over 25% of my high school students who auditioned made it to the area round or further using these 5 simple strategies that most students overlook. So in this video, let's break down decades of teaching students how to make All-State into 5 easy strategies to follow. These are the same strategies I teach my students to move to the top of the results list without spending hours in the practice room. And later in this video, I'll show you how to access the same resources I use with my students to make it happen. And it all starts off with knowing what you want to sound like. The biggest thing missing from most students' practice routine is actually the simplest thing to do, and it doesn't require your instrument. And this sets the stage for all the other steps we're going to outline in this video. You can only be as good of a player as the player that you hear inside your head. The best and easiest thing you can do to improve your playing is listen to professional players and really try to figure out what makes them so good. What are they doing that you're not doing? What about the way they play their instrument causes people to pull out their wallet and pay for the opportunity to listen to them? Because being good at your instrument is so much more than just using right notes and using some dynamics. Ultimately, people want to hear the ideas, the drama, and the artistry that you're able to create on your instruments. Or, in other words, instead of focusing on playing correct notes and rhythms, focus on making music. Here's a simple way to get started. If you don't know who to listen to, start off with a quick Google search for top players on your instrument. Then choose 2 or 3 people and do a little background research. Ask yourself, who is this person and why should I be listening to them? And while you're listening to them, here are the 4 questions that I like to ask my students. What do you like about this person's tone and how is it different from yours? What do you like about the way this person starts each note? And what do you like about the middle of each note? How are they shaping the phrase? What do you like about the way they end each note? The more time you spend listening to professional players, the better and clearer you're going to be able to hear those players inside your head, and the better your practice will get. Because as you develop what you want to sound like, you will start to notice all the little tiny aspects of your playing that don't sound like the people you are listening to and what you want to sound like. And now you can sound like a professional player every time you play. And this is my golden rule for practicing. If that person you're listening to were to come into your practice room and then you play part of your music and then they play the same part of the music with the same speed, everything's the same, would you sound as good as they do? Because it can and it should. And this is where I see so many students fall short. Instead of trying to sound good each and every time, we do it over and over and over again, hoping that we might get better, hoping that if we do it enough, maybe we'll get good. But the problem here is every time you sound bad, every wrong note, every missed dynamic, every missed articulation teaches your brain to play the audition wrong. Think about what's happening inside your brain when you practice. Each time you play the music, you are creating and developing these neural pathways inside your brain, much like building a road. And when you start to learn music, it's like walking through a field of grass. The more you walk that same path, the more a trail will start to develop, and the easier and easier it is to walk down that path. But each time you play it wrong, or anything that doesn't sound like the audition you want, you start to cut new pathways for your brain to send information down. And the more times you do it wrong, the better that pathway gets. And now it's harder and harder for your brain to do it right because it has so many different options to take while you play the music. And then when you add that pressure and that nervousness of the audition, so here's the solution. Play the music like the professionals you're listening to every time. Because if you make fewer mistakes in the practice room, you're going to make fewer mistakes in the audition room. But I'm not a professional. It's true, but you can still sound as good as a professional. The question you have to ask yourself is, what do I need to do to sound like a professional? What do I have to do to play it perfectly each and every time? For most, it's slow down. A lot. For most, it means going no faster than half the tempo. For others, it might mean slowing down to doing it 1 note at a time. And you should only be working on small sections of the music at a time, and then do it again. Repetition is key. Consistency is what wins every single time. It's not always the best player in the room who wins the audition. It's the most consistent player. It's the person who can walk into the audition room and play the music like they practiced every single time. So once you can take a small section of music and you can play it as good as the professionals we're listening to, do it again. My rule of thumb, if you want to make region, you should be doing it 3 times in a row. If you want to take it to the all-state and area levels, then you should be doing it 5 times in a row. And if you mess up, start over. Only when you can do it successfully like this should you move to the next section. It's super boring and mentally exhausting, but it's also very effective. It allows you to get more accomplished in less time with less effort. I give my students 2 different practice strategies for this, one of which I'll cover later in this video. The other is pretty simple. Take 3 or 5 coins and set them on your stand. And then each time you play a section that you're working on, if you like the way it sounded, move the coin to the other side of the stand. If you mess up, either move 2 coins back or move them all back, depending on how determined you are to make region, area, or all-state this year. But this has one major problem, a flaw that must be addressed while you're practicing music. You will only be able to play your audition as good as you can play your instrument. So, improve your ceiling. Ceiling simply being how good you can physically play your instrument. At the end of the day, no matter how much work you do on your audition music, you will only be able to play the music as good as you can play the instrument itself. So an important part of working on your audition music is working on fundamentals. Some might call this a warm-up, some might call this a daily routine, but something I see far too often is students working really hard on playing right notes and right rhythms, but never working on their ability to play their instrument better. So what ends up happening is you work on this music and eventually you will hit the ceiling of how good you can play your instrument fundamentally. But if you're working on playing high notes with a better sound, or you're working on playing more in tune, isn't your audition music getting better too? Not only that, but isn't next year's audition getting better too? And the year after that? Because you're getting better. So start your practice routine off by working on fundamentals on your instrument. This could be things like tone, dynamics, tuning, breathing, technique and speed exercises, sight reading, lip surge, range, scales, vibrato, buzzing on the mouthpiece. And something you might not have thought about, working on singing. Not only will this help you improve your tone, but this also help you improve note accuracy as well, since it trains your brain to hear their notes better. Something to be aware of though, be careful of doing something for the sake of just doing it. Playing through a long tone exercise isn't gonna make you better. It takes work. You have to think about, what are you working to try and improve today? Am I working on this to build better tone or a fuller sound? Am I working on this to create better tuning? And if you play a low brass instrument and you're not really sure where to start, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can download the fundamentals book that I use with my students. Lastly, have a plan. The easiest thing you can do to improve the way you practice and build an audition that blows everybody else out of the water is have a plan. In a second, I'll show you mine. But imagine walking into rehearsal and the director just starts from the beginning every day and just aimlessly wanders through the music. You never get anything ready for the concert. But do you practice like that? When discussing this with my students, there are 2 key things that you need to consider. 1, when are you going to practice? Think about your schedule and make sure practicing is a planned activity on your calendar. While it seems like a fairly simple idea, if you're not purposeful about when you're going to practice, you're going to end up putting things off, and before you know it, it's October already, and there are only 5 weeks left in the audition. I see this time and time again. Students put off practicing because they're busy, and then they try to cram in as much practicing as they can in the final few weeks before the audition. And it's going to be very difficult to beat somebody who's putting in regular practice and regular cleaning into their audition music. So create a plan for what days you're going to be practicing on and when. And secondly, when you do practice, have a plan for what you want to accomplish. Don't just aimlessly wander through the music hoping that you might get better. Go into practice knowing what fundamentals you need to be working on this week and what you're trying to do with those fundamentals to get better. And what sections of the music you want to work on and why. Think about that picture of the professional player playing the music like we talked about earlier, and then think about what sections of the music don't match that picture yet. What sections am I not playing as consistently as I want my audition to sound? And then take a small section of the music and practice it perfectly every single time. And then as we get closer to the auditions in December, I will release a video on some of the practice techniques that I use with my students to get ready for the auditions themselves. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. And if you play tuba, euphonium, or trombone, and you want some help putting all of this together, knowing exactly what you should be doing each and every week, leading up to the auditions in December, every year I put together a roadmap for my students to follow so they know exactly what they should be doing each and every week. Breaking down that process of getting ready for your audition into easy to manage 20 to 30 minute practice sessions, including what fundamentals and what technique exercises you should be working on each and every week. If you want access to the step-by-step plan that I put together for my low brass players, just check the link in the description below. But that's it for now. Like and subscribe if you can, and I'll see you in the next video.